The cabin appears through the snow like a half-remembered dream. Dark windows staring out from under a heavy white brow of accumulated powder. Smoke threading from the chimney in a line so straight, it looks drawn by a ruler. 17-year-old Mara Kendrick stops on the trail, breath clouding in the frozen air, and stares at the impossible sight. There shouldn't be smoke. The lawyer said the place had been empty for 8 months, since her grandmother died last March, locked up and forgotten at the end of a Forest Service road that gets snowed in from November to April. But smoke means fire, and fire means someone is inside. And Mara's hands tighten on the straps of her backpack, because she's walked 6 miles uphill through 2 feet of snow to get here in this cabin. This broken-down relic she's never seen before is the only thing standing between her and the foster system. She starts moving again, boots punching through the crust, and as she gets closer, she sees the door is abricated, the window glass intact, the porch swept clear of snow. Someone has been taking care of this place. The question that tightens her throat is simple and terrifying. Will they let her stay? She climbs the steps and knocks, and the door opens before her knuckles finish the 3rd rap. The woman standing there is maybe 70, compact and weathered, with iron-grey hair pulled back and eyes the color of January sky. She looks Mara up and down with an expression that gives nothing away, and Mara feels herself being measured against some standard she doesn't understand. "You're Helen's granddaughter," the woman says finally, and it's not a question. Mara nods, words stuck somewhere in her chest. The woman steps back and opens the door wider. "I'm Iris Grayson. I've been looking after the place since your grandmother passed. You're late. I expected you a week ago." Mara steps inside, and the warmth hits her like a wall. Wood smoke and something cooking, and she has to blink against the sudden sting in her eyes. "I didn't know if I should come," she says, and her voice comes out smaller than she means it to. "The social worker said the cabin was condemned, that I couldn't live here legally, that I should just let the county take it for back taxes." Iris closes the door, and the sound of the wind cuts off, leaving just the crackle of the fire in the wood stove and the tick of a clock somewhere in the shadows. "Your grandmother left you this place for a reason," she says. "Question is whether you're smart enough to understand what that means." Mara's story is the kind that social workers see too often and never get used to. Her mother, Helen's daughter, left when Mara was 3, chose methamphetamine over motherhood and never came back. Her father tried for a while, working construction and doing his best, but a fall from scaffolding when Mara was 12 left him with a back injury and a prescription that became its own problem. By 15, Mara was essentially raising herself, making sure bills got paid, getting herself to school, pretending everything was fine when teachers asked if she was okay. Her father died in July, an overdose the coroner ruled accidental, but that Mara knows in her bones was surrender, and she'd been in the system ever since. 3 foster homes in 5 months, 2 decent, 1 nightmare, none of them home. She'd been sitting in the social worker's office 2 weeks ago when the lawyer's letter arrived, forwarded from an address she'd moved out of a month before, estate of Helen Kendrick deceased. "You are named as sole beneficiary." The cabin was in the Pisgah National Forest, accessible only by foot or 4-wheel drive. No utilities, no road maintenance in winter. The lawyer had been blunt. "Take the title if you want, but you can't live there. It's not zoned residential anymore, and frankly, it's not habitable. You'd be better off signing it over to the state and taking what little value there is in the land. Lease." But Mara had looked at the grainy photograph attached to the estate documents and seen the cabin perched on a ridge with mountains rolling away in every direction, and something in her chest had cracked open. A place no one could take, a place that was hers by blood, if not by practicality. She'd signed the papers accepting the bequest, and 2 days later she'd packed everything she owned, told her current foster parents she was going to visit a friend, and caught a Greyhound to Asheville. From there, a local bus to the trailhead. From there, her own 2 feet carrying her up into the mountains in the first serious snow of the season, following GPS coordinates until her phone died, then following the trail markers until those ran out, then following instinct and stubbornness until the cabin appeared. She hadn't known what she'd find. Hadn't let herself hope for anything beyond 4 walls and a roof. The reality of Iris, of the fire, of the place being cared for, is so far beyond her expectations that she doesn't know how to process it, Iris pours her tea from a kettle on the wood stove, strong and dark, and gestures for Mara to sit at the table. It's a beautiful piece of furniture, scarred pine that's been scrubbed smooth by decades of use, and Mara wraps her hands around the mug and waits. "Your grandmother and I were friends for 40 years, Iris says. She moved up here after your grandfather died, said she couldn't breathe in the city anymore. Built this cabin with her own hands, most of it. Lived here alone from 72 until this past spring. She was the toughest woman I ever met and the kindest. When she got sick, really sick, she asked me to look after the place until you came. I told her you might not come. She said you would, said you had her blood and her blood doesn't run from hard things." Mara feels the weight of that, the expectation of a woman she never knew, and she doesn't know if it's a gift or a burden. "Why didn't she ever contact me?" she asks. "If she wanted me to have this, why didn't she ever reach out?" Iris's expression softens just slightly. "Your mother made Helen choose a long time ago. Her or the drugs. Helen chose tough love. Cut your mother off, hoping it would force her to get clean. It didn't. And by the time Helen realized that, your mother had disappeared and you with her. Helen tried to find you, but your father moved around a lot, didn't want to be found. She kept trying right up until the end. This cabin is her apology and her hope, both at once." Mara looks around the space and sees it clearly for the first time. One main room with the wood stove as its heart, a kitchen area with a hand pump and a dry sink, shelves lined with jars and cans, a loft accessible by a ladder, and 2 doors leading to what must be a bedroom and storage. The walls are chinked logs, tight and well-maintained. The floor is wide plank, covered in rag rugs that look handmade. There's a kerosene lamp on the table and another on a shelf. Books everywhere, spines cracked and covers worn. It's sparse but not barren, functional but not cold. It's a place someone loved. Iris drains her tea and stands. "I've kept the firewood stocked and the roof patched. There's food in the pantry, enough to get you through a couple of weeks if you're careful. After that, you'll need to figure out your own system. The hand pump works, but you'll need to prime it if it freezes. The outhouse is behind the cabin, built solid, won't blow over. There's a root cellar accessed from outside, south side, good for storage. And there's the attic." She pauses, and something shifts in her expression. "Your grandmother made me promise not to go up there, said it was for you and only you. I kept that promise. Whatever's up there, it's yours to discover." Mara follows Iris's gaze to the ceiling and sees the hatch she hadn't noticed before, a square cut into the planks above the loft, fitted so precisely it's nearly invisible. "What's up there?" she asks, but Iris is already pulling on her coat, winding a scarf around her neck. "That's between you and Helen," she says. "I'll come by in a week if the weather holds. If you need me before that, follow the trail west for about 2 miles, you'll see my place. And Mara," she adds, turning at the door, "your grandmother didn't leave you this cabin because she felt guilty. She left it because she knew you'd need it and because she believed you could handle it. Don't prove her wrong." Then she's gone, the door closing behind her, and Mara is alone in the silence of the mountains, with a cabin she doesn't know how to keep, and a mystery in the attic that pulls at her like gravity. She spends the first day just existing in the space, learning its rhythms. The wood stove needs feeding every few hours. The hand pump requires priming with a cup of water, kept in a jar on the counter, then 20 strong strokes before it coughs and produces a stream of clear, cold water that tastes like stone and iron. The outhouse is an experience, frigid and dark, but functional. She finds her grandmother's clothes in the bedroom, practical things, flannel and wool and canvas, and after a moment's hesitation, she tries on a coat. It fits almost perfectly, just a little long in the sleeves. The pantry holds jars of preserved vegetables, beans and tomatoes and pickles, sacks of rice and flour, tins of coffee and tea. There's a notebook on the shelf labeled "Rations" in careful handwriting, with calculations of how much to use per day to make supplies last. Her grandmother was a planner, methodical, prepared. Mara recognizes the impulse because she's lived it herself. That constant calculation of scarcity, the knowledge that no one is coming to save you, so you'd better save yourself. On the second day, she climbs to the loft and looks at the attic hatch. Fair's fitted with a simple brass ring, and when she pulls, it swings down smoothly on well-oiled hinges, releasing a breath of cold air and the scent of old wood. A ladder is built into the frame, and Mara climbs carefully, her head emerging into darkness that her phone's dying flashlight cuts into sharp relief. The attic is bigger than she expected, running the full length of the cabin, peaked ceiling high enough to stand in at the center. And it's full. Not cluttered, but deliberately packed. She sees steamer trunks and wooden crates, boxes wrapped in plastic sheeting, shapes covered in canvas tarps. Everything is organized, labeled, protected. She pulls herself up fully and starts exploring. The first trunk holds books, not just any books, but first editions, leather-bound spines stamped in gold. She lifts one carefully and sees the title, Walden by Henry David Thoreau. First edition, 1854. Another, Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman, 1855. She doesn't know much about rare books, but she knows these are old, and she knows old books can be valuable. She keeps looking. The second trunk holds maps and prints, botanical illustrations in frames, hand-colored and exquisitely detailed. The third holds something that makes her breath catch, paintings, small ones, unframed, stacked carefully between sheets of acid-free paper. She lifts the top sheet and sees a landscape, mountains in autumn, painted in oils with a precision and depth that even her untrained eye recognizes as skill. The signature in the corner is too small to read in the flashlight beam. She moves to the next, a portrait of a woman, then a still life, then another landscape. There are maybe 20 paintings in this trunk alone. The fourth trunk is different. When she opens it, she finds documents, legal papers, land deeds, letters in plastic sleeves, and on top, a large envelope with her name written in the same careful hand as the ration notebook. She sits back on her heels and opens it. Inside are two things, a letter and a small leather-bound journal. She reads the letter first. Mara, if you're reading this, then you made it to the cabin and you were brave enough to look. I'm sorry I never got to meet you in person. I'm sorry for the years I lost with your mother and with you. I can't fix the past, but I can try to give you a future. What's in this attic represents a lifetime of collecting. Your grandfather was a literature professor and a lover of art. We spent 40 years traveling, buying what we loved, building something beautiful. When he died, I couldn't bear to sell any of it, so I brought it here and kept it safe. The books alone are worth over $1 million to the right collectors. The botanical prints, another $500,000. The paintings, if they're authenticated properly, could be worth $2 to $3 million. There are appraisal documents in the trunk with the legal papers. But here's what you need to understand. This wealth is not liquid. You can't walk into a bank and trade paintings for cash. Selling rare books takes time, expertise, and connections. Authentication requires money you probably don't have. And the moment you try to sell any of this, you'll owe estate taxes that could consume most of the value. I've consulted with lawyers. The estate is set up to minimize tax burden, but it will still take months, maybe years, to liquidate these assets properly. So the millions in this attic won't save you this winter. They won't pay for food or keep you warm. What will save you is what's in the journal you're holding. That's my real inheritance. Everything I learned about surviving in this place. How to forage, how to hunt small game, how to preserve food, how to read weather, how to keep the cabin standing. I've lived up here alone for 30 years. I've survived blizzards and droughts and injuries and loneliness. And I wrote it all down for you. The treasures in the attic are your future. The knowledge in this journal is your survival. Use both wisely. You're stronger than you know. You have my blood. That means you're a fighter. Welcome home. Helen Mara sits in the cold attic, with a fortune in art surrounding her and her grandmother's survival journal in her lap. And she understands with perfect clarity what Iris meant about being smart enough to understand. The millions are real. The value is real. But they're also a test. Will she try to cash out immediately, fail and lose everything? Or will she do the hard thing, survive the winter using her grandmother's knowledge, and then carefully, methodically turn the inheritance into actual security? It's not a choice, really. She can't sell paintings from a cabin with no internet and no phone service in the middle of a snowstorm. The only path forward is survival, and the journal in her hands is the map. She descends from the attic with the journal and spends the rest of the day reading by lamplight while snow ticks against the windows. Her grandmother's handwriting is small and precise, each entry dated, each topic organized with headers and subheads like a textbook. November 1990, first winter alone. Lessons learned. The entries are practical to the point of terseness, but Mara reads between the lines and sees a woman teaching herself to survive through trial and painful error. Don't let the fire go out at night. Woke to 28 degrees inside the cabin and couldn't feel my fingers for an hour. Keep coals buried in ash, add wood before bed. Mara looks at the wood stove and realizes she's been letting it burn too hot, wasting fuel. She adjusts the damper the way the journal instructs and watches the burn slow and steady. The journal becomes her Bible. She learns to make the hand pump work, even when ice forms in the mechanism, by pouring warm water down the shaft. She learns which foods to eat first before they spoil, and which will keep for months. She learns to set snares for rabbits using wire and bait, and though her first attempts catch nothing, she adjusts based on the journal's notes about placement and timing. On her 5th day, she checks the snare line and finds a rabbit dead and frozen, and she carries it back to the cabin with a mixture of triumph and guilt. The journal has a section on butchering, and she follows it step by step, gagging twice but finishing the job. And that night, she eats stewed rabbit with wild onions she found near the creek, and it's the best meal she's had in months because she earned every bite. The snow keeps falling. By the end of the first week, there's 3 feet on the ground and the trail down the mountain is impassable. Mara is completely isolated. No phone service. No internet. No contact with anyone except the chickadees that come to the feeder her grandmother built outside the kitchen window. She talks to them while she works, narrates her day, asks their opinion on whether she's doing things right. It helps. The loneliness is a physical thing, a pressure in her chest, and the sound of her own voice breaks it up just enough to breathe. She thinks about the attic, about the millions in value sitting above her head, and it feels surreal. She could be a millionaire, technically. But she's also a girl eating rabbit stew and melting snow for washing water and shitting in an outhouse at 10 below zero. The contrast is so absurd she laughs, and the sound echoes strange in the empty cabin. By the 3rd week, she's developed a routine. Wake at first light, build up the fire, melt snow for water, eat oatmeal with raisins and a spoonful of honey, check the snares, gather firewood from the covered stack behind the cabin, midday meal of rice and beans or preserved vegetables, afternoon work, mending clothes, organizing supplies, studying the journal for what's coming next, evening meal, read by lamplight, bank the fire, sleep, repeat. It's simple and it's hard and it's hers. She feels herself changing, her body getting leaner and stronger, her hands developing calluses, her mind sharpening to the tasks of each day. The grief for her father is still there, a constant ache, but it has space now, room to exist without destroying her. She cries sometimes at night quietly, and then wakes up and does the work, because the work doesn't care how she feels. Christmas comes and she marks it by opening one of the jars of preserved peaches and eating the whole thing. Sweet and cold, a tiny celebration. She thinks about the paintings in the attic and imagines selling one to buy her father back, to rewind time, to fix everything that broke. But you can't buy the past. You can only survive into the future. She writes in the margin of her grandmother's journal, "First Christmas alone. Still here, still fighting. It feels like enough." The first real crisis comes in early January. Mara wakes to a strange sound, a groaning creak that seems to come from everywhere at once. She climbs down from the loft and sees the problem immediately. The weight of snow on the roof is too much. The center beam is bowing, and as she watches, a crack appears in the plaster near the chimney. If the roof collapses, she'll be buried. The stove will be destroyed and she'll freeze to death in the wreckage. The journal has a section on snow load and roof maintenance. After heavy snow, you must shovel the roof. Use the long-handled scoop stored in the shed. Work from the edges inward. Do not stand directly under the peak. She finds the scoop, a wooden contraption that looks medieval, and climbs onto the roof using the ladder she props against the side. The pitch is steep and the snow is deep, and one wrong step will send her sliding off the edge to a 20-foot drop onto frozen ground. She works in terror, scraping and pushing, watching avalanches of snow cascade off the sides. Her arms scream, her back spasms. But slowly, painfully, the load lightens. When she climbs down 3 hours later, shaking with exhaustion, the beam has stopped groaning. The crack hasn't spread. She saved the cabin, barely. The second crisis is infection. She cuts her hand on a rusty nail while repairing the chicken coop, a deep gash across her palm that bleeds heavily. She cleans it with boiled water and wraps it in clean cloth, but 2 days later it's hot and swollen, red streaks climbing toward her wrist. Blood poisoning. She knows enough to know that's deadly. The journal has a section on medicinal plants. plantain poultice for infection, yarrow to stop bleeding, echinacea for immune support. But it's January, and everything is buried under snow. She searches desperately and finds dried herbs hanging in bunches from the rafters, labeled in her grandmother's hand: plantain, yarrow, golden seal. She makes a poultice following the instructions, applies it to the wound, changes it every 4 hours. She makes tea from echinacea root and drinks it even though it tastes like dirt and bitterness. For 2 days, the infection gets worse, and she watches the red lines creep higher and thinks, "This is how I die." 17 years old and killed by a rusty nail. On the 3rd day, the swelling peaks. On the 4th, it starts to recede. On the 5th, the redness fades. The wound begins to close clean. She sits on the floor and shakes with relief, and when she writes in the journal that night, her handwriting is unsteady. Almost died. Grandmother's herbs saved me. I owe her everything. The 3rd crisis is starvation. By mid-February, her supplies are running critically low. The rice is gone. The flour is gone. She's down to dried beans and a few jars of vegetables, and the rabbits have been scarce for weeks, either trapped out or driven deeper into the forest by the relentless cold. She's losing weight, her clothes hanging loose, her energy flagging. She needs protein. She needs fat. She needs more than she has. The journal has a section on ice fishing. The creek freezes solid by January, but there's a deep pool below the beaver dam where trout winter. Cut a hole, use grubs for bait, be patient. She hikes to the creek, finds the pool, and spends an hour chopping through 8 inches of ice with a hatchet. Her hands are numb by the time she breaks through. She baits a handline with a grub she dug from under the bark of a dead tree and lowers it into the black water. And waits. 2 hours in the cold, 3. She's about to give up when the line jerks. She pulls and feels weight, real weight, and hauls up a trout the length of her forearm, silver and speckled and thrashing. She almost cries. That fish, fried in the last of the oil and eaten with boiled dandelion roots she dug from the unfrozen ground near the spring, is the best thing she's ever tasted. She goes back the next day and catches 2 more. It's not abundance, but it's enough. She survives. The 4th crisis is cold, pure and simple. A cold snap drives the temperature to 15 below zero, then 20, then 25. The cabin is tight but not perfect, and cold seeps through every gap. She burns wood faster than she can replace it. The pile outside shrinks daily. She ventures into the forest to cut more, but the dead trees are frozen solid, her saw barely biting, and each piece she manages to cut takes half an hour of brutal labor. She's burning more calories cutting wood than she's taking in from food. The math is unsustainable. She looks at the furniture in the cabin and makes a decision. The extra chair, the small side table, the wooden crate she's been using as storage. She breaks them apart and feeds them to the stove, and the dry wood burns hot and fast, buying her hours of warmth. It feels like defeat, like she's consuming the cabin to survive, but her grandmother's voice is clear in her memory. Things can be replaced. You can't. She burns what she has to burn and makes it through the cold snap, and when the temperature finally climbs back to zero, it feels tropical. The 5th crisis is psychological. By late February, the isolation is crushing. She hasn't seen another human being in 6 weeks. She talks to herself constantly, holds conversations with imaginary versions of her father, her grandmother, even the social worker. She knows it's not healthy, but she can't stop. The silence is too big. The aloneness is too heavy. She climbs to the attic one night and sits among the paintings and books, surrounded by millions of dollars of value that mean nothing here. And she thinks, what's the point? Why am I doing this? The answer doesn't come easy. But slowly, as she sits in the cold and the dark, she realizes she's doing it because she can. Because her grandmother did it for 30 years. Because survival is its own point. Because she's building proof that she's more than the circumstances that tried to break her. She climbs back down with one of the small paintings, a landscape of these very mountains in summer, and props it on the mantel. A reminder. There's green on the other side of white. Spring will come. She just has to last. The worst comes in early March, when winter should be loosening its grip, but instead tightens like a fist. A blizzard rolls in, the kind the weather service would call historic if Mara had any way to receive warnings. It starts as light snow, and within hours becomes a whiteout. Wind screaming down the ridge at 50 miles an hour, visibility 0. The cabin shakes. The chimney howls. Snow forces its way through gaps Mara thought she'd sealed, piling in small drifts on the floor. The temperature inside drops to 40 degrees even with the stove roaring, and she can't keep up with the wood demand. She's burning everything she can, but the wind is so strong it's sucking the heat straight up the chimney. She wraps herself in every blanket, every piece of clothing, and huddles by the stove, feeding it constantly, watching the wood pile inside dwindle. When it's gone, she'll have to go outside to the main stack, and in this wind, that's a death sentence. She rations. One piece every 20 minutes, calculated desperate. The blizzard lasts 3 days. 72 hours of howling wind and driving snow. Mara doesn't sleep, just dozes in fits, waking every time the fire needs feeding. She loses track of time. Day and night are the same grey chaos. On the second day, the door blows open, the latch giving way under a gust, and snow explodes into the cabin before she can fight it closed again. She has to pack the gap with rags and weight it with the heavy trunk from the bedroom. On the third day, she runs out of inside wood. The storm is still raging. She has no choice. She bundles up, ties a rope around her waist and anchors it to the stove, and pushes out into the whiteout. The wind almost knocks her down immediately. She can't see the wood pile, can't see anything. She follows the rope to its end, then feels forward with her hands and her fingers find the tarp-covered stack. She loads her arms with as much as she can carry and staggers back, following the rope, and collapses inside with 6 pieces. Enough for maybe 4 hours. She makes 3 more trips, each one harder than the last, and on the final trip she falls, drops the wood, and can't find it in the snow. She crawls back along the rope empty-handed, defeated. Inside, she feeds the stove the last of what she carried and sits shivering, watching the wood burn down, and she knows she's out of options. If the storm doesn't stop in the next few hours, she'll freeze. She thinks about the attic, about paintings worth millions, about the absurdity of dying rich. She thinks about her father, about whether there's anything after this, about whether he's waiting. She's not ready. She's so tired, but she's not ready. And then, as if the mountain heard her, the wind begins to drop. The howling fades to a moan, then to silence. She looks out the window and sees stars. The storm has passed. She waits until first light, then goes outside into a transformed world. The snow is chest deep. The woodpile is half buried. But the sky is clear and the air is still, and she's alive. She digs out the wood she dropped, carries it inside, and builds the fire back up. Then she sleeps for 16 hours straight. When she wakes, it's to the sound of dripping. The eaves are shedding water. The snow on the south-facing slope is starting to melt. She steps outside and feels warmth in the sun for the first time in months. It's not spring, not yet, but it's the promise of spring. She survived. The worst is over. The thaw comes slowly, then all at once. By mid-March, patches of ground are visible. By late March, the trail down the mountain is passable. Iris arrives on the first clear day, hiking up with a pack full of fresh supplies, and when she sees Mara, thinner and harder and alive, she smiles. "You made it," she says simply. "Your grandmother knew you would." Mara helps her unload the supplies, coffee and flour and sugar, luxuries that feel like miracles, and they sit on the porch in the weak spring sun, and Mara tells her about the winter, about the roof and the infection and the blizzard, about the journal that saved her life. And then, carefully, she tells Iris about the attic. Iris listens without interrupting, and when Mara finishes, she nods slowly. "Helen told me there was value up there, but not what kind. She wanted you to discover it yourself. What are you going to do with it?" Mara has thought about this through the long winter nights. "I'm going to do it right," she says. "I'm going to graduate high school first, online from here. Then I'm going to contact the appraisers and authenticators, get everything documented, sell pieces slowly, strategically to collectors who'll value them. Use the money to make this place legal. Get the zoning changed, install solar and a well. Turn it into a real home, and I'm going to keep some of it. The paintings especially, because they were my grandparents and they're beautiful. And having money is supposed to mean you get to keep what matters." Iris reaches over and squeezes her hand. That's exactly what Helen would have wanted. Over the next weeks, Mara begins to build her future. She hikes down to town and enrolls in online classes, using the library's internet. She contacts the appraisers named in her grandmother's documents and sends photographs of the collection. The responses are immediate and enthusiastic. One of the paintings is authenticated as the work of a Hudson River school artist, valued at $1.2 million alone. The books are catalogued by a rare book dealer who offers to broker sales on consignment. The process will take time, years probably, but the path is clear. She's not going to be instantly rich, but she's going to be secure, set, free to choose her life instead of having it chosen for her. She uses a small advance from the book dealer to pay the property taxes and hire a lawyer to start the zoning appeals. She buys a used laptop and a solar charging system. She plants a garden in the cleared space behind the cabin, using seeds from her grandmother's stores, and the act of putting things in the ground feels like faith. By May, the forest is green and loud with birds. Wildflowers carpet the meadow below the cabin. Mara hikes the ridges and sees the world her grandmother loved, and she understands why Helen stayed. It's not about running away, it's about running toward silence and beauty and the hard, clean truth of survival. She keeps the journal going, adding her own entries below her grandmother's. May 2024. First full winter survived. Lost 15 pounds but gained everything that matters. The attic held millions, but the real inheritance was the knowledge. You taught me how to live, Grandma. I won't waste it. She props the painting back on the mantel, the summer mountains, and every time she looks at it, she remembers. Green comes after white. Warmth comes after cold. Life comes after survival. In June, a journalist from a regional magazine hikes up to interview her about the girl who survived winter alone and discovered a fortune. Mara is careful about what she shares. She talks about her grandmother's strength, about the cabin, about learning self-sufficiency. She doesn't mention the specific value of the collection, doesn't want treasure hunters or thieves, but she's honest about the lesson: the money won't save you. Skills save you. Knowledge saves you. The will to keep going when everything says quit, that's what saves you. The article runs in August, and Mara gets letters from people all over the country. Foster kids who feel seen, people who lost parents, people who survived their own winters. She answers everyone. By the time the first snow falls again in November, the cabin is transformed. Solar panels on the south roof, a drilled well with a hand pump backup, insulation upgraded, firewood stacked 8 feet high. Mara is 18 now, legally an adult, no longer subject to the foster system. She's enrolled in online college, studying environmental science. She's sold 3 paintings and 4 collections of books, netting just over $800,000 after taxes and fees. She's kept the rest. She has a bank account, investments, a future. But more than that, she has competence. She knows how to survive. And that knowledge is worth more than all the paintings in all the attics in the world. She sits on the porch on a cold November evening, wrapped in her grandmother's quilt, watching the first snow fall, and she thinks about the girl who arrived a year ago, desperate and scared and alone. That girl is gone. In her place is someone harder, smarter, surer. Someone who knows that wealth is measured in resilience, that inheritance is what you build as much as what you receive, and that survival is the first step toward a life worth living. The cabin is hers. The mountains are hers. The future is hers. And she earned every bit of it, one frozen day at a time. If this story meant something to you, if Mara's journey reminded you that you're stronger than you know, I need you to hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more stories about courage, survival, and the unexpected inheritances that change everything. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the most valuable thing someone ever left you, and was it what you expected? I want to hear your story. And share this video with someone who needs to know that sometimes the real treasure isn't what you find, it's who you become while searching. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.